Aida. Actually, we would vote.
Okay, see what I can do. Well, thank you, and I will half speak because I want to make sure that I don't lose, thread of my thoughts. So what I wanted to do before I discuss the term is to mention briefly my motivation and my perspective on this term, because I think that the term of a glossary such as this is never a neutral or an abstract definition. I think that within the Internationale, the fact that we're having a glossary means that a term is a situated tool with a specific use value within this group, and at the same time is a performative act of meta-language. We're constructing our reality as we wish it to be. So, louder. Okay, I will try. I was saying that I think that the term for this glossary is not just a term that can be defined in an abstract way, but we have to consider it as a tool with use value within the group and the processes of this group, and also as this performative act of meta-language, like working with language in order to displace a reality, construct a new one, but at the same time reproducing what is the basis for the very existence of the institutions we work with. We cannot just overturn them completely. So that's why I thought that it was important that in discussing this term,
You'll not be hungry.
Delivery.
Later.
Pizza. Yes, later. So it's important that we operate a reflective term on the Internationale, on our own institutions when we discuss this term. So this is from where I speak, from my specific, I say my institution, but that's really weird for me to say. Well, anyway, the institution I work with. Then I also think that we need to refer to concrete experiences or instances of reality. I don't know how to call it. When we discuss theoretical issues, for me that's very important, otherwise I cannot think. Maybe it's some kind of mental disability that I have, but unless I refer to realities, I find it difficult, especially when we're dealing with these politically charged terms. And then thirdly, I'm talking from this awkward position that I have, having an insider and have an outsider of the institution I work with, and also a newcomer to the Internationale, so I don't share sometimes the codes of sharing that have been built over the years, but that's okay. I mean, it's not well, it is sometimes uncomfortable, but it's not a serious issue. But I'm half in between spaces, and then I also want to be specific about my place in the institution, because I work with two of the more subordinate departments in the museum, the education department and the public department. Maybe education is quite obvious what it means, but the public department deals with the experience of publics in general as audiences, literally understood as audiences that enter the museum. So this 80% of tourist public, we deal with that. We deal with the complaints that they write to the museum and that we have to respond to those. So this position is really like housekeeping work. So it's totally, we do, in a way, these departments are not the ones that are expected to produce any theoretical or critical thought, but we provide just a service. These are what we do. This is what we do. So we do maintenance work, we do the cleaning, and we do the listening. Literally the cleaning. When there's a leak or some problem with the roof, we have to run there with a bucket. So we do the cleaning and we do the listening too, because we listen to the complaints, to what people, when they get lost, we have to tell them where Guernica is. Second floor, room 206.
Why hurt?
So we deal with the multitude, but mostly with the mass, and sometimes even with the mob. Dali exhibition has become like a trauma in the institution when they had these huge queues that they had even to choreograph. It was like trying to make them go like this, bending, so it looked very nice. And people asked us if the public in the museum were so organized and aesthetically aware that they decided to queue in this beautiful way. No, there were people making them queue like that. It was like this mass ornament. You could see like images of masses being as ornamental in their multitude appearance. So this is the kind of publics we deal with. So we do unglamorous tasks, as Nora Sternfeld put it. We deal with the tedious, with the disagreeable, with the compromised, with the unsound and the unpresentable on a daily basis. So this is the place from where I speak. That being said, in this exploration of the tamed labor, I will be moving gradually from a notion of constituency in the sense of the collectives we engage with, because this is how it's been used so far in our discussions. But from there, I will try to move on to imagine how that engagement implies a challenge that exceeds dialogue, but actually should lead to an overturn of the ways in which the institution works. Although I agree that there is a risk of identifying constituency with just a particular target group or a fraction of the public, or a group of interest. Sorry. So I think that constituency. Sorry, I think I got lost. Okay, there is a risk to identifying constituency with a particular target group or a group of interest, and I think that definitely constituencies are not a fraction of the public or an audience. So. But I also think that it is important to keep the term related to specific configurations of relations among specific people in specific conditions. So I still have the need to be in relation with groups of people that cannot be targeted or circumscribed with a single definition. They are not universal either, but nevertheless they exist there, they are specific, and they have specific situations and conditions. So I hope I can walk successfully in this thin tightrope, like not falling on any of the sides, abstracting this idea of constituency or making it too particular. So I think that the notion of constituencies implies a particular relationship with the art institution. The introduction of the concept in the International website is quite interesting, I think, because, as they say, constituencies provide the public institutions with the building blocks to reimagine their role in the production of new forms of citizenship. And also they say that the alter institutionality is based on a shift away from hierarchical, top-down and broadcast-based models of knowledge dissemination, which has already been quoted before. So then I have a feeling when I read this that within this paradigm, constituencies are expected to perform many tasks and produce many effects. That is, they are made productive and in many dimensions, in their cognitive dimension, in their emotional dimension, corporeal, theoretical, symbolic. I think that in this sense, constituencies are going to do us a favor in a way. The institutions are going to be renewed and transformed thanks to constituencies, so they are in a way doing this job for us. That's how the term labor came to, well, that's something important to discuss. So at the same time, this productivity is more specific and more intense than that of mere audiences or users. In contemporary forms of cultural consumption, audiences become more and more involved in their reproduction and dissemination of value through their active participation. For example, in TV shows, the internet, the theater, cultural institutions. As a post-industrial figure, users have become prosumers, professional consumers, which can determine a niche of specialized consumption or even of production, especially in technology. In both cases, consumption and production become two inextricable dimensions. Of course, this is something that we can be critical about, but audiences are so often considered in this function as professional consumers that close this circle between consumption and production. But when cultural institutions decide to shift towards this paradigm of constituencies, and I'm following maybe the change in the discussion in the Internationale when constituencies came into the discussion, they weren't there before, but then they were. I wasn't present at that moment, but epiphany, but I arrived after that happened, and I was inquiring about the process by which constituencies become a term that was relevant for International. I heard of all kinds of narratives. I'm not concerned about which one is the true one, but it happened. It wasn't there before, and then it was. So we've moved towards a different paradigm, which is this one of the constituencies. So I think that then we go beyond the synergistic dependency of production and consumption. Constituencies are fluid and mutable. They are never instituted. They are contingently and transitorily becoming such through specific configurations of relations, and therefore are not defined by an essential quality, but neither are they defined nor produced by the institution. They have relative autonomy and agency independent from it. Constituencies imply then a different notion of involvement, agency, accountability and co-responsibility. They do not just participate in and enhance the circulation of value determined by an institution, but they have a role of interpellation and of critical dialogue with it. Although dialogue, I think, it's also a problematic notion. But finally, the relation between the institution and the constituencies is not one of mutual use, I would say, but one of mutual challenge in the production of the above-mentioned non-hierarchical models of knowledge dissemination and of new forms of citizenship. So I think that whenever we discuss constituencies, we have to consider their contribution as labor too, both within and outside the institution. And I'm thinking now again from my specific position within Reina Sofia, because I'm in contact with Somateca, which used to be the design constituency group of Reina Sofia, and they knock on my door now and then to inquire about what's happening with the Internationale. What do we know about this? So I have them quite present, so maybe when I talk about constituency I have them in mind, but not only them, of course. If we consider that their participation has to do with some kind of work being performed, labor, I think that this widens the debate beyond theoretical discussions that have their origin and rationale in the agendas of the art institutions themselves. And it opens it to the conflictual dialogue with the debates of some of the collectives identified by the museums of the Internationale as their constituencies, whatever it might mean. By introducing the notion of labor, new terms and tensions enter the discussion about constituencies such as, for example, recognition, autonomy, negotiation, collaboration, retribution, distribution, gift and commodity, money, precariousness, exploitation, misuse, and so on. Those concepts can work both ways, but they are never symmetrical when we enter into relationship with other collectives and groups. So, independently of the nature of the constituencies, the work of constituencies in relation to cultural institutions has to be discussed in the light of the analysis of cultural work in contemporary post-Fordism. Within this context, constituencies are positioned as cultural workers, let's say, and therefore share the same, no matter if they are originally cultural workers, but when they enter into relationship with the institution, they somehow become cultural workers, even if they are just asylum seekers, migrants. In a way, I think that sometimes we turn them into cultural workers. And therefore they share the same paradoxes and complexities. For example, we could say that they perform this immaterial labor in which cognitive and affective dimensions are fundamental. So we set subjectivity at the center of this production. These conditions relate, of course, to the feminist analysis of cultural work that Robbie, for example, or Maria will have done, and that of domestic and care work, and here I would quote Federici, of course. Very often they are highly skilled, educated, creative subjects, although that does not translate into privileged position, but rather they are precarious workers that face low or irregular wages and stable employment. They can even be in extreme conditions of non-citizenship or endangered citizenship, or in life risk situations even. They feel the pressure of the ideology of entrepreneurship, that's especially for professional cultural workers. This ideology of entrepreneurship, self-management and human capital on the one hand, and then on the other hand they also feel the need for the struggle for social rights as an essential element of culture. So to a certain extent, the notion that cultural and artistic activities are not work, and we really need to discuss this a little bit. We come from this tradition in which we consider that cultural and artistic activities are not work, and this has its origin in the dominant narratives about art as a romantic, self-expressive impulse, but also in the resistance of many artists against the reduction of their creation to material economic exchange, as Isabel Lore and Marion van Osten have discussed. And cultural work is mainly built on and sustained by the motivation, enthusiasm, and even pleasure that cultural workers experience while doing it. For a contemporary cultural worker, it is not easy to tell friends from colleagues, desire from demands, and socializing from networking. Therefore, cultural labor is not always paid, or it is paid insufficiently, and sometimes other values are at play, such as recognition, prestige, and even self-realization, creating situations that border sometimes exploitation. Cultural institutions establish more or less engaged relationships with constituency groups, often in the form of collaboration. I think this is a term that we're going to discuss just immediately after this one. And to collaborate seems to imply a situation in which the agents involved enter freely or consciously into a shared and codifying process that levels to a certain degree these unequal power positions that they occupy. But even if it is so, I would argue, of course we should argue that all these assumptions, this equality, this freely negotiated situation and so on, is of course should be interrogated and not taken for granted. But even if we consider that in a collaboration we have this kind of relationship, the Latin root labor is nonetheless present in the word collaboration, indicating that we cannot ignore that work is at stake here too. Even when we work together, we do not do it under the same conditions. Therefore, issues of recognition, distribution, and retribution must be considered carefully. But certainly not everything can or even should be reduced to a monetary equivalent. This is a movement that, after all, is responsible for the abstraction of work into an exchangeable amount of time value. We also run the risk of turning constituencies into just subcontracted workers for the institution, and we're discussing this morning over breakfast, so I include this reflection. Money is important, but other values are at play, such as transparency and the democratic distribution of roles and resources. And I wanted to quote the minutes of the International Constituencies Group's meeting here in Liverpool in 2014. The minutes were written by Jana Graham, and it's just a paragraph. They said in these minutes, it is important to avoid a situation that unconsciously replicates power structure, i.e. institutional framing versus a community participating, some gender bodies doing more admin than others, doing more speaking, discourses formed within a particular educational context, etc. These formations are the heart of vertical cultural organizations that folks want to change, so it will be important to find ways to unsettle routines of speaking and listening, and for people to try on other, less comfortable roles that allow everyone to reflect on power within the groups. This will be important on the local level, on the level of the management group, and also at the next network encounter, all of which risk settling into institutionally dominant paradigms. Unquote. Even this negotiation or dialogical tone, because they are being quite friendly, I think that this discussion pushes the term constituency more towards a disruption of institutional structures, as I hinted at the beginning of this presentation. Specific but non-targetable groups of people can challenge institutional structures. This disruption can happen through a storming of the institution, like in the Liberate movement. It can happen through an accepted taking over of the institution until it was no longer sustainable, as in Las Agencias in Malta. It can take place through an long-term collaboration, like in the Ontario Art Gallery, in the project that was run by Jana Graham herself. Of course, how radical or reformist these transformations are is an issue here, but we, of course, could keep on discussing. But I would like to finish then by exploring a little bit more the consequences of these kind of relationships. We don't know how constitutive power can be related to the institution, because it's already been said that they kind of oppose to each other. This constitution constituting living this tension in a way that is as if they would really contradict themselves so extremely that one doesn't exist if the other exists. It's a quite tensioned relation. It is so tensional that I wonder how the publication that we were presenting yesterday can be called Constituting Museum. How does it work? It's an oxymoron, an interesting one, of course, but I think that this is quite difficult to imagine. But I would like to just list a series of aspects that would certainly be destabilized in the institution when it enters this questioning by constituencies. For example, it's not a complete list and probably lacks a lot of reflection and discussion, but this is the things that come to my mind when I think of this radical questioning. For example, the number and kinds of subjects legitimated to interpolate the institution. Who? What kind of subject is legitimate in terms of body ability, race, sexuality, age, class, cultural capital, nationality, etc. We are quite homogeneous in terms of the kind of subjects that enter into a dialogue, a legitimate dialogue. I have the right to put you into trouble with my voice. Not everybody has that right. Even within institutions, not all the people being part of the institution has the same right to say something that is taking in. The right of speaking is quite easy. The right to be listened to is not that easy to get. So, Then the forms of knowledge and of knowledge production that are considered to be valid in this dialogue. This of course involves these discourse regimes we enter in, and how we formulate notions that are can be listened to. They establish distinctions between rational and irrational, intellectual and affective, mind and body, which are very clearly defined in institutions usually. The disposition and regulation of times and spaces, that's super rigid in institutions. What would happen if we would use time and space of an institution differently? It probably will be a disaster. It would be so problematic. It's so simple, time and space, but it's totally radical. The criteria about what should be inside and outside the museum. The criteria about what aspects of the institution should be visibilized or invisibilized. The decision-making processes and the agents involved in those. The financing and economic management of the institution. The accountability processes regarding what we should be accountable for, how and for whom, or to whom. And then, oh yes, contents and activities. But I think that this is like the list. And I wonder, again, how can the international organization and the institutions composing it respond to this challenge? I really don't know. I live in a paradox. And that's all. Thank you.